Amphibious assault ships are used to help land and support ground forces on enemy territory. At a glance, they resemble aircraft carriers, but they're primarily designed for supporting helicopters.
All right, y'all, welcome back to Coming Arms channel. Okay, so today we're doing another joint reaction. Now, of course, these are kind of all like Navy focused because, again, she has like way more Navy knowledge than I would ever have. So this one is also from Not What You Think. Before, we checked out their video about why you can't like jump from an aircraft carrier again, which was kind of interesting, but this one should be pretty cool. And again, I don't know like how much you know about all the different types of ships. I don't know a whole lot. I mean, I know that some are bigger than the others, but as far as like their armaments and kind of what they even do. So this one is going over all the different types of warships. So off the top of my head, I mean, I know there's amphibious ships, there's aircraft carriers, there's like helicopter docks, there's destroyers. What am I missing? Like obvious ones.
The small boys that detect the land, not the landmines, the...
Oh yeah, like more intelligence kind of focused stuff.
Yes. So like,
all right, well, yeah, I guess well, she's gonna learn a little bit too in this video, I guess, but yeah, should be cool. Hopefully we'll learn a lot, but again, Not What You Think, they always have some pretty cool videos and some pretty solid footage in these as well, so let's check it out.
4.5 acres of sovereign and mobile American territory. That's how the U.S. Navy describes their Nimitz-class carrier.
4.5 acres?
Most people know what an aircraft carrier or a submarine is. But there are 7 categories of modern warship, which consists of aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, corvettes, amphibious assault ships, and submarines.
What about battleships?
Oh, well, a battleship was a large armored warship with large caliber guns. They were the most powerful type of warship during the late 19th
like a destroyer
and early
now,
20th
right?
century. But as newer types of warships started traveling the blue waters, battleships faded away, with the last one being decommissioned at the end of the Cold War.
And how about the
end of the Cold War? End of the Cold War still seems a lot more recent than I expected. I mean, I guess when you're talking about the actual conflict focus, if it's not like World War II or whatever, and there's not like navies literally going against each other, you might not necessarily need or even have, you're probably not going to want to divert a lot of funding to go against this kind of stuff, but I guess destroyers are probably the closest thing now.
I mean, you got to think about it. Just about every ship has the capability of becoming.
Yeah, like every ship has a pretty decent armament, but I guess that's probably the one that I can think of that has like more anti-ship focused stuff.
No more audience questions during the video. That's what the comments section is for. So once your voyage through this video is over, you'd know why destroyers
cool how they get them all together.
Even though all warships have the power to destroy, and you would finally know what differentiates these classes of ships from one another. Or will you?
Damn,
that looked like Norfolk.
Yeah, I was about to say all that.
The first aircraft carriers became operational in the early 1920s, storing, launching, recovering, and servicing aircraft at
rubber
sea,
bands,
enabling a nation with airborne operations far away from home and close to the enemy is very advantageous for obvious reasons. A single supercarrier holds enough firepower to rival the entire air forces of some nations. A carrier air wing is able to perform over 150...
That's actually a pretty funny thing about, like, yeah, aircraft carriers have that strategic purpose to, like, bring all these aircraft all over the place, but to think, like, yeah, there's actually some countries that, you know, like, this armament alone on an aircraft carrier, a single aircraft carrier, would be about equal. You ever work with an aircraft carrier?
The biggest that we worked with was the LHD Iwo Jima. It's the baby to the carrier.
Yeah, it's like the helicopter docks.
Yeah,
that was the one that we were on for Fleet Week or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's great. I don't think that we needed a carrier for what we were doing for our mission.
Yeah, a lot of the like amphibious ready groups or whatever, the ARGs, a lot of them won't even be focused around like an aircraft carrier. Like certain missions, especially like depending on where you're going in the actual ocean, will depend on kind of what ships you're bringing, but like for hers, she had like the LHD, like the helicopter dock, which is kind of like a smaller aircraft carrier, not necessarily meant for fixed wing. What did it have on it? Like just helicopters? I mean, it's a helicopter dock, so I'd imagine. But can it support any fixed wing? Yeah, because I went on Fleet Week with the Iwo Jima, and it's big, but it's not like an aircraft carrier, not by any means, so...
A carrier air wing is able to perform over 150 strike missions at once hitting over 700 targets a day. But they
That's
can also
badass.
protect friendly forces, conduct electronic warfare, assist in special operations, and carry out search and rescue missions.
It's huge. Holy
Super
cow.
carriers can accommodate 4,000 to 5,000 personnel, including the ship's company, air wing, and
Yep.
other support staff. Even
heard
though
that?
aircraft
Yeah.
carriers do
So
have
there's like Air Force on the ship as well, right?
Every branch that needs to be on that mission can be on it.
That's kind of cool to be able to get like to be in the Air Force and be like on a ship. I mean, I don't know if it's as cool for them because it's the Air Force and they are used to like nice places. But I mean, it'd be kind of cool. Like, at least you get Navy ribbons and
Is it-
stuff.
Hazard pay, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, for real.
surface-to-air missiles, guns, and other armament. They usually do not travel alone. Instead, they travel with a fleet composed of other
Submarines.
classes
Yeah.
of military
So cool.
ships called the Carrier Strike Group,
Yep.
which is
There you go.
typically made up of an aircraft carrier, at least one cruiser and 2 destroyers or frigates, and a carrier air wing of 65 to 70 aircraft. A carrier
Jeez.
strike group could also on occasion include
That's cool.
submarines, logistic ships, and a supply ship.
Yeah.
An aircraft
Oh, what the heck?
For my deployment, because we were not that big.
Well, yeah, this is like I don't even know if this is necessarily deployment. That's an LPD right there.
Yeah.
Damn, look at the LPD compared to the freaking.
Well, yeah, the LPD is only like 500 feet.
I think this is an LHD right there. You can't
Yeah, you
really
can't-
get a
You,
good.
Definitely. I was gonna say
That's gnarly.
carriers are
That's actually like really
massive.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That seems like really close for these ships to
I
be
mean-
maneuvering. The submarine though, that's so badass. Did you ever get to chill with a submarine next to the ship?
Heck no.
This must
I
have
didn't
been
have
like
like
you'd need like the president to sign off on something like this. That's a lot of
An
freaking
aircraft
effort.
carrier often acts as the command platform
that?
for large battle groups
70?
or multinational
78?
task forces. Aircraft carriers traditionally ran on diesel fuel,
I think it's a
but
British
some of the
aircraft
newer
carrier.
aircraft carriers are nuclear powered.
These aren't.
cruisers.
Nuclear power is
Colonial
pretty
times,
freaking
a
insane.
cruiser would have been cruising the world, showing off their
That
flag
thing's not
and
cruising.
representing an overwhelming force that could be brought to bear far from home. The name has stayed,
That's so
but the
cool,
role is
actually.
not exactly just cruising around anymore.
Damn, I think
During the
sunk.
period between the end of the First World War in 1918 and the beginning of the Second World War in 1939, also known as the interwar period, cruisers were limited by treaty to a maximum size of 10,000 tons. Two types were defined by
10,000.
treaty.
That doesn't
the
seem like
heavy
a lot.
cruisers carried anywhere between 8 to 10 8-inch guns, and the light cruisers carried 12 to 15 6-inch guns. But
Okay.
both heavy and light
Wait, so it's a cruiser. Cruisers are, I imagine, are supposed to be like faster, right? It's a cruiser.
I
but-
mean, I would imagine,
but
yeah.
these things look pretty freaking. Well, I don't know. Never
They
mind.
have a lot of people on them.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's not as
I
big.
think
I
I
wonder-
feel like they changed the way that they used cruisers.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know. I mean, with the battleship, that completely went away, but some things maybe doesn't keep the same purpose.
cruisers carried a heavy battery of secondary and anti-aircraft guns. In wartime, cruisers were to operate alone on the high seas to interdict enemy commerce, but
Okay.
also to protect the battle line against enemy light cruisers. These were mostly heavy cruiser roles, but both types of cruisers usually had top speeds in excess of 30 knots.
Ooh.
Today's cruisers
That's
are
not
primarily
fast.
guided
No, it's
missile
not.
warships,
Okay.
ranging in size anywhere from 7,000
kinda
to
fast.
10,000 tons. Only the
What is it called? Like full? Is it actually full? Like
Full
full
speed
speed?
ahead.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure like 30 knots is generally like the full speed for most. I mean, if you're going full speed, you're going for like a very specific purpose. Like never going full speed. That was like half speed or something.
I have not been on a ship that has gone 30 knots before.
I mean, yeah, okay. I guess if you're so 30 knots, 1 knot is like 1.1 miles an hour. So going through the water on a massive ship going like 30 miles an hour is pretty fast, I guess.
A lot faster than
like
the big boys.
I'm thinking like going through a school zone with like an aircraft carrier going that fast.
largest navies can afford to build and operate modern cruisers, principally the United States and Russia. In today's world, the role of the cruiser depends on the navy that it's employed in. In the US Navy, cruisers are primarily an anti-air defense vessel, while in the Russian Navy, they're anti-ship platforms. Other missions include commerce
Okay.
raidings and shore bombardments. Even though the US Navy at some point had a number of nuclear-powered cruisers in its fleet, they were all decommissioned in the 90s, since they were deemed too expensive to build and maintain.
Yeah,
What?
nuclear
enough
cruiser.
cruising.
Though.
Let's move on to
What's the point of
destroyers.
that?
Before we talk
I
about
don't know what the
destroyers,
role
we
is.
need to briefly
Yeah, that's-
talk about torpedoes.
You
In
can.
18...
So when you talk about like nuclear power, that means I know like nuclear. I don't know if I can even. I don't know if that's unclassified. But...
I know. That's why I was like, I can't. There's only so much. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, they can go like years and years with, nuclear power without having to like refit their reactor or whatever. So again, for a cruiser, I mean, I guess it's cool if you don't have to worry about that at all. But for like longer operations, it's not really that kind of like strategic level stuff to be getting involved in that much.
1966, an English engineer called Robert Whitehead invented the first effective self-propelled underwater torpedo, eponymously
That's
named
huge.
Whitehead
Cool.
torpedo.
Holy cow.
At the time, battleships were heavily armored and protected against gunfire, but only above the waterline. So the invention of Whitehead torpedoes changed everything. Suddenly, there was a weapon that could be carried on a small, fast, and relatively inexpensive boat called a torpedo boat that could strike a large ship underwater, bypassing all its armor protection.
That's
A torpedo had the
so
potential
weird
to
to see.
cripple and even sink a battleship with one blow.
Oh,
But wait,
damn.
with all its armament, why wouldn't a large battleship be able to annihilate a little torpedo boat? See, the turbine engine allowed the torpedo boats to reach speeds that challenged the large caliber but slow-firing guns on the battleships and cruisers. As a result, a
How
new
fast?
class of ships emerged to protect the main
like it was
fleet
going
from
pretty freaking
torpedo
quick.
boats, and it was creatively called torpedo boat destroyers. Torpedo boat destroyers were larger than torpedo boats, but much, much smaller than the cruisers, and this
Holy
meant that they were
cow.
more maneuverable and
That's-
better.
That's
That
so
sounds-
trippy to see.
It's like barely
Dude,
above water.
I know, and it's hauling butt. I mean, I don't see
Like,
anybody
That
topside, but
definitely has to be where they're driving the ship, if
Yeah.
not under.
yeah, this looks more like it's like a weird in between like a submarine and a ship.
That they were more maneuverable and better equipped to deal with the torpedo boats. So they started traveling the blue waters with the fleet to protect them against torpedo boats. But shortly after, the destroyers
So
themselves were armed with torpedoes, which allowed them to torpedo bigger enemy warships beyond the range
Damn,
of the
you see that thing
small
flexing?
coastal torpedo boats. And that was the end of it for the torpedo boats, but not for the torpedo boat destroyers, which are now just referred to as destroyers. Destroyers were protectors of the fleet, so when submarines became practical, the destroyers were equipped with depth charges, sonar, and
Right,
other
okay.
anti-submarine weapons, and became the submarine's #1 enemy. And when the aircraft
Again, I don't know. I mean, I imagine destroyers still have the armament to go against submarines, but would you really go after like I don't know. I don't know how fast submarines go now, but I feel like it'd be pretty hard to detect and find a submarine and actually like. I mean, of course, it's good to go after it if you see it. If you see it, then they're probably really messed up. But
Yeah.
that's freaking crazy.
That's why you have all those safety nets. You've got like lookouts topside and
Yeah.
then verification with the OSs to make sure that, hey, do you see this? Because for all we know, it could be a humongous whale. And you're not going to know
Yeah,
until you have
that's true.
someone topside that says, yeah, I definitely see water coming up. That's definitely a whale.
So if it's a destroyer, it seems like it has one like anti-submarine stuff. It's got torpedoes. It's probably got guns to actually fire directly on the ships, and I'm sure it also has like counter indirect fire stuff as well. So it's pretty crazy to think they have all these different armaments that they're kind of responsible for. I mean, even like your standard ship will have like sort of anti-air defenses as well, and sort of like anti-piracy cannons too.
became a major threat to the naval fleet, destroyers adopted anti-air missiles. So this is how destroyers became the jack of all trades among warships. Today, destroyers are the largest surface
Jeez.
combatant operated by most navies.
What do you think
ranging in
angle that
size
was
up
for
to
listing?
6,000 tons. Destroyers were fast
Ben.
ships, generally capable of speeds in excess of 30 knots in calm seas. But with the
Excessive.
destroyers getting larger and more
So
heavily
weird
armed,
looking.
the difference between the cruisers and destroyers have greatly
Oh, it's
diminished.
huge.
While a cruiser should nominally be bigger, this is not always the case. But a cruiser
Seagull.
is generally considered to have greater facilities for command and control, at least in the US Navy, which often means cruisers have more space and spare energy to power the additional communication equipment and a command and control room to coordinate the defense of the fleet.
Okay.
Similar to
sense.
destroyers,
Command ship kind of
frigates
thing?
are quite common ships in the
Sounds about
Navy's
right.
fleet. They're quick to maneuver, and their role is to escort and protect larger vehicles from air, surface, and underwater
So
threats.
these are just like
Frigates are one of
security.
the
is
smallest
where you
blue
would
water
work.
surface combatants.
Yeah, that would
In
be
the
kind of
past,
cool.
they used to carry a lighter main battery
Super
than
small.
destroyers. For example, 3-inch or 5-inch guns would have been typical. These days, they may have anti-air guns and perhaps a small battery of torpedo tubes.
Is this like the Chinese ripoff of the LPD? That's what it looks like, huh?
I mean, to be honest, the way that they're like, there's no portholes or anything. How do they?
Do
Well,
they?
Okay, so
Do you have
those,
portholes in a LPD?
Yeah,
Really?
there's at least like I want to say it's the captain's.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Captain gets one,
get
but-
a nice view.
Those square holes back there are where they're gonna throw the line out to moor the ship.
Okay. Yeah, and I've noticed like even it, huh?
No, oh, it looks like they do have a safety net back there,
Oh,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
fence.
Yeah, it looks like a freaking chain link fence. It's
I
not
mean,
even like
gotta be
offset.
safe somehow.
I guess. That's tempting to lean against though.
I know.
The ones on your ship, you can't even do that.
No.
However, they're not particularly well suited to theater air defense. Their strength is usually in their anti-submarine weapons. For example, the
Okay.
Royal Navy's Duke class of frigates have specialized anti-submarine warfare capabilities and are fitted with enhanced sonar equipment and torpedoes.
They seem pretty similar to the
Anti-submarine
destroyer
warfare
though.
frigates come with helipads and hangars that accommodate helicopters capable of identifying and attacking nuclear submarines using torpedoes and depth charges.
That's so
I was
cool.
gonna say,
Frigates
but-
are traditionally slower than destroyers, although in modern times there's not a significant
Whoa,
difference.
it looks fake.
Look it up. I mean,
It looks
yeah,
fake.
but
What were you
what was
saying?
it? So, but when you think about getting to the smaller, faster ships, it's more specialized crew. You can't go there fresh out of boot camp.
Yeah, like especially like if you're a helicopter pilot, that's one thing, but a helicopter pilot that's going after submarines, that's freaking crazy.
And the landing pad that they have to land on while it's
yeah.
moving.
True.
I mean,
Seen some videos where that goes
the
south.
Osprey's bouncing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a little scary, but I mean, that's what they do. That's their job.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to be a Marine and be like going on and off. You're not really seeing how close you are to like death or danger, so and you don't have any control of it, so you're kind of desensitized to it.
Those ships remind me of the new class that they released that you weren't supposed. The boatsmates weren't going to have to.
The LPD or
No, the LSD,
LCS. Yeah,
LCSs.
the littoral combat ships.
where it was going to be all high speed, where minimal maintenance, minimal crew, and you're going to get the job done a lot faster. That's what that ship looks like.
Yeah, well, no, I think we saw it a couple times. Yeah, we're not seeing. We might see it a little bit later on. It's littoral combat ship, so I'm not sure what that would.
That,
Sounds like
be
it's
amphibious,
yeah,
sort of.
Yeah, true.
because we're
I don't know. It
France in
seems
their
like it might
speed.
be like a new
Today's
class.
frigates often
But
displace
littoral,
up
yeah.
to 3,000 tons and are usually capable of top speeds of 27 to 30 knots. One of the faster frigates is the Indian Navy's Shivalik class, which can travel at speeds of up to 32 knots.
Ooh.
Some
Ooh.
European navies, such as the
Fast.
Dutch,
Yeah.
French, German, and Spanish, use the term frigate for both their destroyers and their frigates.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what the heck?
Vessels that are smaller than frigates
Oh,
are
so
typically
cool.
identified
Sweden,
as
man.
corvettes or missile boats,
So
which are
slick.
not big enough to have a full air defense
huge.
radar, and therefore are not used to escort other vessels or
those are
defend
the
large
ships that they
areas.
use.
Why
I
does
feel
it
like
look so funny?
that's the ship that they used in Lightning McQueen.
Like, Lightning McQueen?
Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah, it kind of looks. It reminds me of the LCSs now, but yeah, I don't know what's with Sweden. They really like pointy edges and I don't know sharp edges.
Aerodynamic. That's why didn't it say that they could go
guess.
like faster?
I don't know about this one. Yeah, let's check it out.
Therefore are not used to escort other vessels or defend large areas. They play more of an offense role, given that
That's
they can
cool.
use their anti-ship missiles to attack and are small and maneuverable enough to avoid being hit. They're also typically not suited or capable of operating in blue waters, so they typically stay closer to the shores.
Oh snap! Okay.
The missile boat is a small craft outfitted with several anti-ship missiles. They have low cost and are somewhat an outgrowth of torpedo boats
That's
from
Finnish,
World War
I
II.
think. Yeah.
A corvette is a smaller version of a modern frigate, but it's usually geared towards one type of mission, either surface or anti-submarine warfare. The first littoral combat ship,
What the heck happened to
USS
that?
Freedom, was commissioned in 2008. Littoral combat ships are a U.S. Navy design
no.
meant to replace the Perry-class frigates.
Oh,
While
okay.
the
So,
LCS-class ships are
wait,
smaller than the frigate-class.
what is this? I don't even know if this isn't even American. I
No.
don't think.
Yeah.
Again, look, it's so tempting to be leaning on these rails.
I mean, those rails look a lot better. I mean, but the picture's better.
Yeah. Okay. So the LCS is kind of like a new core. It's replacing it. Wait,
It's
no, we're
replacing the frigates.
yeah. Why are we on? I'm getting confused now. Yeah. Okay.
That they're replacing, they offer a similar level of weaponry while requiring less than 50% of the crew. They can
Yeah.
have a top
Yeah.
speed that exceeds 40 knots.
Oh, yep.
Damn.
Littoral combat ships are smaller vessels and are well suited for littoral or close
So
to
funny
shore
looking.
operations.
So cool.
In
That's
other
what was
countries'
in my
navies,
Green.
the closest
okay.
to
LCS.
littoral
Yeah, okay,
combat
of
ships
course.
will be patrol vessels or corvettes. One interesting feature of
That's
littoral
cool.
combat ships was their modular design. They could be reconfigured for different roles, like
Huh.
anti-submarine warfare or surface warfare
that was
by
sick.
changing their weapon
Cool.
systems, sensors, and mission crews. These module changes were envisioned to happen within a few hours,
Awesome.
but in practice they took a lot longer and proved to be logistically difficult.
Yeah.
In a
no
2016 announcement, the US Navy abandoned the modular concept for littoral combat ships and decided to use them with a single module.
Dude, imagine being on the ship and then you're like, okay, so this part of the ship does this thing, this part of the ship does one thing, like the well deck, the flight deck. Okay, yeah, they're gonna do the same thing, whatever the boat house with that thing in like the middle. They'll do like, is it the boat house? Where you have the little boats?
Yeah.
The boat house?
I feel
Yeah.
like it's boathouse.
Yeah, so imagine having like specific purposes for different parts of the ship, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, hey crew, now this is for something completely different. Yeah, it probably, I don't know if you can train the sailors to be like that proficient. I mean, I guess you could
At
if you have
50% capacity,
Yeah.
again, you have to
yeah,
be... It's almost like
That's
you have
asking
to
a lot.
submit to go to there, get approved if you're on point.
yeah, but you'd
Good.
be miserable on that ship when it's just changing up. Like just you go to one part
But
of the ship and all of a sudden
I think
it's
if
completely
you
different.
look back at the ship, I don't think that they could stand topside, meaning there's no lookout. Like what I had on the New York.
It looks. I mean, yeah, it looks like the.
So they would have
Yeah,
had
maybe
to
somewhere.
shift that rotation, and theoretically,
Again, that's just. I mean,
the stress on the sailors. But I mean, they changed and adapted. So
yeah, no, you probably had a bunch of sailors that are like, "Yo, Lockheed Martin or whoever, like this shit ain't gonna happen. This shit's not gonna work." Sorry.
Amphibious assault ships are used to help land and support ground
Hell
forces
yeah,
on
so
enemy
cool.
territory. At a glance, they resemble aircraft carriers, but they're primarily designed for
Some of
supporting
them do.
helicopters. They
Flying
can also carry
helicopters.
vertical and short takeoff and landing aircraft.
Okay.
Most modern amphibious assault
Makes
ships
sense.
have a well deck, which is a hangar-like deck located at the waterline in the stern of the ship. When the well deck is flooded, landing craft
Ooh,
and
well deck.
hovercraft can be launched and recovered without the need for a crane.
Dude, that's the most. But that's it. That's all They didn't even show the LPD at all.
maybe it's in the background.
Maybe. Okay. Yeah. So some amphibious ships, you
About-
had like the LSD, you have the LPDs, the LHDs. I mean, they all look very different from one another, and they kind of. I mean, they all kind of have the same purpose, I guess, like a flight deck and a
Transport.
well deck. Yeah,
Transportating.
amphibious. But yeah, this is terrifying
Launched
right
and
here.
recovered
That
without the need for a crane.
it's like I hope it goes back up. Ooh,
A
submarines.
submarine, also commonly referred to as a sub, is a watercraft that's capable of independent underwater
Thanks.
operations. Submarines typically fall into one
Cool.
of three propulsion categories: diesel-electric transmission, nuclear power, and air-independent propulsion. All current submarines in the US Navy are nuclear powered, but there are a few other countries like Russia, France, the UK, China, and India which also have nuclear powered subs in their fleet.
Okay.
Submarines
Damn.
range in size from midget submarines with a displacement
Midget.
of less than 150 tons to ballistic missile submarines with a displacement of up to 48,000 tons when submerged. And regardless of their
Yeah, that
size,
makes
they're
sense.
all referred to as boats. There are three major types of
Okay.
submarines in the U.S.
Interesting.
Navy: attack submarines, cruise missile submarines, and ballistic missile submarines. Attack
Yeah, so when I was in Kings Bay, we refitted mostly the ballistic submarines. So those were the SSBN or Ohio class submarines. I think those are the biggest ones. But it's pretty crazy when you see the submarine go into like a dry dock and they drain all the water out and you see how massive a submarine actually is. It's pretty insane. But a lot of that space was taken up because it's a ballistic missile and it could fit like 24 of them. I know that's unclassified, but yeah, it could fit 24 of those massive ballistic missiles. So there's not as much room for the crew as you would think, which is why I think there's only
You
like,
hot rack.
yeah, how many
for
people?
one.
What, probably like 100, 200?
I had
Maybe?
no idea. I mean,
Not that much. I mean, it's such a specialized thing too. I guess you wouldn't need as much. There's not as many operations going on. Like no one's landing on it. At least
yeah.
they shouldn't
Marines
be.
use torpedoes as their main armament.
What are those buildings
and have
in the
more of a
background? You saw that?
multi-role mission.
Weird.
They're smaller in size, making them faster and more maneuverable. Cruise missile submarines are typically larger and slower boats focused on
That's a
long
nice
distance
area.
strikes using guided missiles. Ballistic missile submarines, as the name suggests, can carry and launch nuclear ballistic missiles.
So crazy.
If you take a look at the 7 categories of warships that were just reviewed, aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, and submarines are quite easily distinguishable from one another, both in appearance and in the role that they play. However, the appearance and role
What the
that
heck?
cruisers, destroyers, frigates,
Dude, is that the U.S. Navy?
Okay, so there's definitely a sub over there on the right.
Oh my gosh. I wonder when this happened. This must have been
I have no idea.
a nightmare. That's pretty cool though.
Destroyers,
To be a
destroyers,
part of that.
frigates, and corvettes once had have been blurred over time. Most of them now have
Okay.
a mix of anti-surface, anti-submarine, and anti-aircraft weapons, and their size and displacement does not necessarily fall within the traditional class designations. It's kind of like iPhones, iPads, and iPods. They used to look different from one another and do different things, but now they all have cameras, touchscreen, and FaceTime, with the only real differentiating factor being the headphone jack on the iPod.
I mean, I guess that's one comparison you could do.
I mean, yeah, the LCSs were supposed to be
Jackal.
interchangeable,
Yeah.
and now they aren't, and now they're just like every
Yeah, I don't know.
other.
They fit a really niche role, I guess, now. I mean, I guess it's so cool if you can function with less crew. That's like a model they can adapt for future ships, but I mean, they're not really developing new ships too often.
I mean,
Look how much the LPD stands out.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty clueless to the differences between some of these beforehand, but I mean, they kind of confirmed the suspicions that like it's kind of hard to differentiate them in general, especially from country to country. I guess, you know, it blends even more. But even as like, you know, the years have gone on, they've kind of changed their purpose a little bit. But again, some of those small ships, they're pretty much all capable of like anti-submarine stuff, general anti-ship stuff, anti-air. So it's like just protecting the bigger ships, the big boys. Is that what you called it?
They have big boys, which is anything larger than a DDG.
So was LPD one?
LPD is a big boy.
Oh, okay.
I
it's pretty big.
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure. I mean, it's.
Oh my gosh.
I mean-
the people on like an aircraft carrier are gonna start canceling you now.
Of course. Well, I mean, obviously, it's not as big as a carrier. Carrier is like the biggest.
I mean, LPD is pretty freaking big when you see it. Like, it's a lot bigger than you would think. But also, like, an LHD is probably the second biggest after an aircraft carrier. So if the aircraft carrier is a big boy, and you know, there's probably not gonna be many others. Well,
maybe it's a.
I don't know.
Yeah, and
I don't
I guess it just depends on how you were brought up in the military too, and the terminology that you learn.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll probably get corrected anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I learned some things. Not as much as I kind of expected. Yeah, I'm still pretty much as hopeless as I thought, but it is pretty cool to see how the capabilities adapt, and also like what the focus is for the different armaments. Because yeah, as the threats emerge and as there's more advanced, like either whatever air to ground or air to sea missiles, you have to start making defenses for all that stuff as well. So it makes it a lot more complicated, and it's just generally good to have, you know, these kinds of defenses on a ship. especially if you
Yeah.
start taking indirect fire or something. These systems aren't like completely infallible, so if you can have like those redundancies in place and kind of beef up the security that way, that's a pretty big thing. Like you need to think, you need to have some really solid security with these ships, because if you don't, then like, yeah, you can't, you're not going to feel comfortable bringing this thing into certain environments. Like when you're on deployment and you're going to like areas where, you know, maybe a rocket might start coming at you. I mean, we've seen it before, right?
The Suez Canal. That was
Yeah.
that was
Yeah, there's definitely potential of something happening. So yeah,
Definitely.
if you have those defenses, of course, you can kind of use that a little bit more audaciously, I guess. Maybe that's one word for it. But yeah, pretty cool video. Again, not what you think. Did some pretty solid research. And again, I think the clips in general that they use are always really interesting, especially with the Navy. Seeing some of these freaking, again, like this last clip here where there's like 60 freaking ships. I don't know. It's just not necessarily stuff you always get exposed to. So that's why it's cool to do these reaction videos. And again, it's kind of cool to bring my limited experience and her also limited experience, as we determined. But yeah, it's kind of cool to bring those together and hopefully add a little bit of context. If not, you guys can just get as lost and as confused as we are. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let us know what you think. If you guys want to see more of the joint reactions, or if you have any like Navy focused recommendations, definitely throw them down below so we can check them out. But that's it for this video. We'll see y'all in the next one.